lost my train of thought.
Especially the kunk kunk part.
Just like last time, I was like, oh, I'll get it figured out this time. Valia will be like so impressed with me.
Afraid you're gonna conjure him or something.
Hi.
Hi.
We're the Reading Queens, and we're here to blab about our favorite books, why we love them, and the book boyfriends we wish were real. And we're back for another episode, so welcome, everyone. We're very excited that you're here. I'm Valia.
I'm Joanna.
I'm Kristin.
Stacy.
And yeah, we're here. We're talking books, so I'm really excited about this episode and the trope we're going to discuss today. But how's everyone feeling today?
All right.
Good. As well as can be expected.
I love that every single time I ask that question, there's like a pause in the like, what? I don't know. It's always really funny. Well, I was going to mention that I was trying to do the homework that you guys assigned to me from last week and finding like my favorite character. And I really couldn't think of any, like I thought about it all week and I couldn't like think of a favorite, but this morning before we sat down to record, I was like, I loved Alex from the Covenant series by Jennifer L Armentrout. Have any of you guys read it?
I haven't.
So that's my favorite thing by her, hands down. And it's very much like the Vampire Academy.
Then I need to read it.
Then you need to read it, yes. But it's like the same feeling because they are in the academy, but it's like Greek gods instead of vampires. And so
That's
I don't
cool.
know, it's so it's so good. I think it's her best work, even though it's like the second thing I think she published. But I love it so much, and I really love Alex, and she's like the kick butt, you know, training and dealing with all the drama kind of a girl with powers that, you know, she like discovers, and it's so good. So
We
I was
like those
yeah,
kick
I
butt
like her.
girls.
Yep, that's our thing. But yeah, so Joanna, you should read it. You
I
can add that to your
definitely will.
list.
My list is just growing and growing and growing.
Yes. But you moved this week, right?
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, it was pretty crazy moving with 3 little kids, and we've lived in the house for 13 years and had never moved with kids before, and we thought we were going to stay there forever, but you know, life happens and we had to move.
Right.
And it all went really well. We had a ton of people helping us on Saturday, so we're all in. We just have a couple more things to do at the old house, and then we're done with the house.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's like
awesome.
bittersweet. Like we're excited to be in the new place, but we're sad to leave the old place.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But yeah, very tired, but I am here and ready to discuss
Yes.
books.
Exactly. That's all that matters. Stacy, what'd you do this week?
I am working on copy edits for my Fae book. So I was listening to my book that I'm reading for this week for the podcast. And I did not finish it. So I ended up being like a really bad time to like, here, let's wait till the last minute because I procrastinate everything. And it's an 18-hour book on audiobook. I didn't realize
Oh,
it was that
wow.
long.
Yeah.
At the same week I'm doing copy edits. So I got the gist of it. I'll talk about it. I like it.
You got the trope part, right?
Yes.
What we were talking about. So
Definitely
there you go. Because I think, didn't you say that you weren't sure if it like works with the trope?
Yes, and it does.
Yay. That's
Excited to hear
perfect.
about it.
Yeah, me too. Kristin, you're being awfully quiet.
I'm just listening to what everybody else is doing. My kids, I live in the West, and all of the kids here have been virtual schooling. It's most of them since for like almost a year. So basically that's what I've been doing this week is making sure because stuff is due and at school. So I'm just making sure they have their stuff in and they're not flunking. And then at night I've been working late. I am on the board for Deep Magic Easy. And I don't know if I ever mentioned that actually. And so I've been reading. Yeah,
I don't
I'm
think you
like
did.
very low key on that, but I actually do read the stories. So if you're a writer, I might be reading your story. And just selecting which ones I want to recommend to the managing editor for our upcoming issue and doing some writing like late at night. So yeah, that's what I've been up to and reading. more reading?
I mean, I read very little this last week, and I'm very bummed about that because I'm currently like in the middle or finishing up a buddy read. I mentioned this before on here, and we're literally on the last like 2 chapters, and I haven't read them, so I feel really bad that she has to wait for me to like discuss
That's like
it.
the worst place
Like,
for
I'm
your buddy to have to wait for
sorry.
you is the ending.
Yeah.
I will say reading all short stories are a lot of times experimental, and they're very heavy on emotion. So I get to read really like truly creative work, and I've been reading short stories almost every day. So I think it's awesome. So
Yeah, that is awesome. I always think short story, I mean, every type of writing is like a different type. Like short stories, it's structured so different, and it's just completely different than like a novella and then a full-length novel or like even a high fantasy novel. But I'm always like really impressed by short story writers because I can do a novella, but anything outside of that, it's really, really hard.
For me, it's got to be like the specific type of story, like, and I don't tend to just come up with those, so I don't write them very
well, they
often.
have to be
Yeah.
obviously structured differently, and there's techniques for that. But one thing that you'll see is sometimes the authors will do something like I read a story, I liked it, we published it, and it was done in reverse order, so it was ending to beginning. So it was so you
Wow.
can see really a lot of very experimental work, and a lot of times in a main book it's really risky to kill off your main character or like beloved characters. In short stories, everybody is at risk, like nobody's safe, anyone could die. And a lot of times you will have in that in a short story, you'll have that emotion, like a kick in the face, like every single time, but you don't know what emotion you're in for. I read one the other day and I knew what emotion they were going to do, and I had an idea of what was going to happen. And even though I knew in advance, and it's, it's like 4,000 words. And at the end of the 4,000 words, I was just bawling, total wreck, just devastated. I was just trashed after I read that. And I wrote to the managing editor, and I was like, we should publish this book. The emotion in this is off the charts. It's legit. But, so it's, I don't know. It's a special place in my heart for short stories and for authors that can either make you laugh so hard you're crying, or just have so much heart in a story that it's like I said, it's like a kick in the face.
Yeah, that's super impressive because it's such a small amount of words to make that big of an impact.
And they have a whole story.
I can't do
a
it.
Story in a whole world, and these developed. It's like it's amazing. Anyway, you could tell I'm so impressed with the stories I've read lately. The authors are phenomenal.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry I got off track with my read.
No, it's okay. It's perfect. We'll just segue into what we read for this week because this is like a perfect spot for it. But I'm excited to talk about these books for sure. We're going to start with Joanna, and she's going to tell us what the trope is, as well as the book that she read for it. So yeah, take it away.
Yeah. So you might have guessed it, but the trope that we were reading this week was hidden magic. And hidden magic is magic. We all know what magic is. But it's like hidden from the world. Like think Harry Potter. That Harry he had no idea about the wizarding world until he was thrust into it. And so that's what we read. I read Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. It's part of the Infernal Devices trilogy. Cassandra Clare, she has this whole world of hidden magic that the Infernal Devices is actually prequel stories to the first ones, which was the Mortal Instruments. I think a lot of people are familiar with it. There was a TV show called Shadowhunters.
Yeah, is this the one? Is it historical? Because it's based.
Yeah. So Infernal. Yeah. So the Infernal Devices is historical. It starts in 1878 in England. So it's also in a different location than the Mortal Instruments was. But in this world, we have Shadowhunters. who are, and I never know how to say this because I've heard it said pronounced different ways, but Nephilim.
That's how I hear
Is that right?
it. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
Sure, go with it.
Or I always read it Nephilim, but then I heard everyone saying that. Anyway, so the Shadowhunters, they're Nephilim, we'll call them that, and they're part human, but they're also part angel. And because they're part angel, they have higher stamina than humans. They're faster, they're stronger, and they have these like special powers or whatever in order to protect the regular people, the muggles, but in this world they're called the mundanes, regular people like us, like to protect us from all of the monsters in the world, like the vampires and the werewolves and warlocks and the fae, which we all love fae. But I love how this world is kind of created. Vampires and werewolves are mundanes who have some sort of a demon disease, like they were bit by something, and it's a disease that they have to become a vampire or a werewolf. Warlocks are half human, half demon, or I think they can be half warlock, half human. Like I think that's how other warlocks are come into creation. And then the fae are half demon, half angel. So they're not human at all, and that's where they get the like they're good, but they're really cruel at the same time. So these shadow hunters are kind of tasked to protect the mundanes from being slaughtered by these monsters. So Clockwork Angel, it starts with our main character, Tessa Gray. She's an orphan. Her brother went to London. She's actually from New York. And she travels to London to meet up with her brother after her aunt dies, who kind of raised them. But she hasn't met up by her brother. She's met up by these two women called Mrs. Dark and Mrs. Black, who actually imprisoned her. And we quickly learn that she is, all of the creatures are called downworlders. And we find out that she's a downworlder who has the ability to, and it's a rare ability, no one has ever really seen it before, but she can transform into someone else at will. Like she can change her entire appearance, and she even can have the thoughts of those people. So she's basically like a shapeshifter.
Yeah.
And so she meets some of the shadow hunters, and there's a little bit of a love triangle with Will Herondale and James Carstairs. And the premise is she's trying to find her brother. Her brother's missing. But there's something going on with people or downworlders wanting to destroy the shadow hunter. So she kind of has to choose between, should I try to rescue my brother, or should I help my new friends, these shadow hunters, and figure out what I am, because she didn't know that she had.
That's so funny.
And so it's this world where they kind of have to keep it hidden magic.
Right.
The humans like don't know what's going on. She had no idea about any of this until this, like she was thrust into this. And a lot of the time she's like, I just want to find my brother and just get back to my life. Like I just want to just be a normal human, but she's not, and she kind of has to come to terms with that she's always been a part of this world. She just didn't know it, and she can't really go back to that. But there's some mundanes that have what's called the sight, where they can see these creatures, and so a lot of times they'll be servants to the shadow hunters and help them out and things like that. But yeah, I reread it. I've read it before, and it was really fun to get back to it, because honestly, this series, it was kind of inspiration for several of my books that I've written. So yeah, it was fun to get back to it. I highly recommend it.
That's cool. That's my favorite by her, which I say without having to read the last book, because
you need to read the last book.
I know. But I told you this before. I'm like terrified of the ending, so I just like pretend to make my own. Like I pre-ordered the last book, and it got here the day it came out, and it's been sitting on my shelf just waiting for me to be brave enough to not get the ending that I want, because that's usually what happens.
I think that ending's very satisfying. Like it's been a while since I've read the entire series, but I feel like the ending I think you might be okay with it.
Maybe, I don't know, because you remember how I'm like always the unconventional person when it comes to like who's the popular choice and what they want them to happen. And so I feel like that's my biggest thing is like I don't want to find out that I just like don't get my way once again.
Well, I think she did this one very well.
I get that. I
Okay.
get that. My very favorite book, fantasy book, I didn't read anything else in the series. And I don't like advertise that because it's a super popular fantasy book. Never read the rest of the series because I did not want it to ruin the first book for me.
Okay.
So,
Well, so I'm not alone.
no, nope.
You gonna
Yes.
tell us what it is?
I know. Now I'm like, what book is that?
I want to know.
She'll tell us in secret, maybe.
Mhm.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I think I might
Which
know what
one?
it is, maybe.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never heard of anybody else doing that, so that makes me feel so much better.
Valia, I got you, girl. Maybe some
Yay.
people who are listening to this, they'll be like, same. And then the rest, the 99% will be like, you guys are weird.
You guys are so weird.
No, I've heard people say that before, that they're like afraid to
Mhm.
finish it because
Okay,
they love
good.
it so much.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I've heard it. I'm not one of those people, but I've heard people say it.
But there is a small percentage of us, so it's fine. It's really funny
Yeah,
though
they
because I've
exist.
never done that with another book.
Mhm.
Like it's just that series because everything like there is a series that I really loved. I think it's The Nightshade. It's by Andrea Kramer. Do you guys remember that? It was a werewolf book. And I loved those books so much. Like the first two books just blew me away. And then I started reading the third book and it got spoiled to me as to what's going to happen. And I was like, nope,
That's no fun.
I don't want it.
Yeah.
So I didn't finish reading the book, but I knew what happened. So like I still had my answer and I was like, nah, I don't like it.
That's what happened with Allegiant. I never finished
Oh,
Allegiant.
yeah.
Oh,
I feel like a lot of people
a
got
lot of
spoiled
people.
there.
Although,
Yeah, well, a lot of people were angry with the end of that one.
really
Yeah.
mad. She had death threats.
Yeah.
Yeah, people
Whoa.
were intense. But I am grateful to her because she was like the Game of Thrones before Game of Thrones was popular, because now authors, when they write characters, their readers, they have a more emotion in the story because they know any character can die. So
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
so we're
Risk.
like, thanks
Yeah,
for
it's good to
taking
have
one
it.
for the team, Veronica Roth.
Yeah.
Right,
That's true. It's interesting.
Well, I think I know what you're worried about, Valia, and you don't need to be worried. Not to like give away what's gonna happen, but it's not what you think.
I know. I might have to. I think I would need to reread the whole thing though,
Yeah.
because it's been so long since I read the first two. I would just need to be like, that's it. I'm binging the whole series. Let's just rip off the Band-Aid and be done with it. What is like 10 years later? I don't know when the book came out. It's been so
Well,
long.
yeah, I have the rest of the series. I own it. It's on my shelf. I'm like, I will never read that because
That's funny.
I've never read any. I've read all the Mortal Instruments, or 4 of them, but not all of them.
There's
But I
6
never
of
read
the Mortal
Clockwork.
Instruments.
Yeah, I read
Mhm.
because I read the first 3 and it was kind of finished, and then the 4th one kind of brings it back in, and I wasn't a huge fan, so I
Yeah,
just
I've
never
read the
finished
original
anything.
3 and I
Mhm.
have the 4th one, but I
Yeah.
haven't. I didn't see the point. I thought it was done at 3, so I was like, I'm good, you know.
Right.
I think she
Yeah.
was. She
Mhm.
was done at 3.
She
Yeah.
was initially, yeah. Which I didn't like kind of where she went with it in 4, and
Yeah,
so I
that
kind of
makes
just
sense.
give up.
What's fun about the Infernal Devices, though, is the last names. You recognize a lot of
mhm.
last names
Yeah.
because they're
Right.
ancestors of people that you know later. It was published in
Yeah,
2010.
it is.
so
It
yeah,
has
it's
been 10 years.
about 10 years.
Wow. I'm actually like laughing at myself now. I can't believe I waited for 10 years.
Well, that was the first one. I'm sure that the third one was like 2000 and
or
Yeah,
2012.
probably
something.
Yeah.
2012, probably.
that whole once a year book
Mhm.
thing that we know nothing about.
Right.
Yep.
Sometimes
That's
it's even
true.
longer. So
Yeah. That's
true.
great.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess maybe I'll do that. That'll be my 2021 project. I'll
I don't-
finally read it.
I liked
but-
the original 3, so the prequel series sounds really cool.
Yeah. See, I think the like the Infernal Devices, I read that after the Immortal Instruments, and I loved it so much more.
So did
I think it was just more, I don't know if it's the writing was like better, different, because they were in London, or right, they were in England the whole time.
Yeah.
Or they're
Mortal Instruments is in New
right.
York, but Infernal
Yes,
Devices
so I
is in
think maybe
London.
like
Yeah.
the setting was just better suited for the story, and the time frame was better suited for the story. I don't know. So I feel like
Maybe.
Mortal Instruments was written first, right? So I mean, writers get
true.
better as
Yeah.
they get as they
Well,
progress. So.
And she has another series now too that I haven't read any of it yet, but it takes place in California, I think. That is after
It's
Mortal
after. Okay.
Instruments.
Yeah, I haven't read it either.
I think so. I haven't read
Yeah.
it, but
Ooh.
I think she released one in 2020.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's huge. It's like a little brick.
Yeah, it is huge.
It's physically huge.
It is huge.
Yeah, like it's
it's like huge.
It's pretty big. Yeah, I haven't really gone back to that world, and it's really interesting to me because the Shadowhunter series that you mentioned, that was like a huge hit that like people were like, it was really funny. People either like really loved it and really hated it. There was like no in between when it was out. And then like when they canceled it, people just like, there was like a riot on Twitter where they were like, bring it back and everything.
There was a movie
There
too,
was.
Wasn't there? Wasn't
Yeah,
there a
no one
movie
liked the
before
movie.
that?
There was a movie before that, which I like didn't like anybody in that movie except for the main character.
I liked Clare.
I don't
I
think
thought,
I did either.
yeah, Lily Collins I like her as an actress, and I thought
like
she
her,
did
yeah.
perfect. But every single other person, that, especially Jace, I was
Mhm.
like, no.
Yeah, I really missed on that one.
I like the
that he
Jason
had
the
like
TV
he had
show.
the personality for it, but
He
he
just
it
didn't
was just hard.
match. Like, and yeah, I don't know. I do remember though when those books were like first becoming popular and people are like casting characters, they always pick like Alex, is it Pettifer or whatever, to be Jace. And I was like,
Yes.
I see it 100%.
He would've been
yeah,
good.
and it just didn't happen.
I remember that.
Fans picked him for like everything though. Anytime you had a blonde character, it was always him. And I think he kind of
It's
got
true.
tired of
I
it.
mean, yeah, but he had the personality, like that whole like, I don't know, just like a jerk. It sounds so bad when I say it, like that whole jerk, nonchalant, like I'm better than you. Like I think he just would have pulled it off because the dude that did it in the movies, I was just like, no, I don't see it.
Well, and Will from Infernal Devices, I feel like he's a bigger jerk
That's
than
true.
Jace ever
Yeah.
was.
And yet, he is my favorite.
They're both
That's true.
Herondales.
It's a family trait. It's fine. Yeah.
Yep.
That's funny. I guess we could just like talk about this forever. No,
An
just
episode
Shadowhunter.
about the
Yeah.
Shadowhunter
I do
world.
think it's like amazing just how involved people have gotten in the world.
Mhm.
Like they're such big fans. It's like, I don't know. I love seeing like fandoms just explode like that. So
Me too.
it's really cool that
Well, and talking about huge, like yes, that book is physically huge, but it's also huge. Like
Yeah.
I've seen it everywhere. It was on the Goodreads,
right.
People's Choice Goodreads for 2020. I don't know I haven't seen who won, but I think it was a finalist.
Yeah, I'm
up
not
there with-
surprised. It does show up like everywhere.
I know.
Really.
Yes,
Going
it
back
does.
to short stories, I read one by Cassie Clare that she wrote years ago, and it was really good. And so, it was just interesting to me because I read that and I was like, even though this was before she was super, super famous, you could tell like she understood. She had all that emotion and great plot in that short story. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, didn't she start out as like a fanfic writer? So she
Yeah,
like
she wrote
understood fandoms. I think that was important too, because she understood the emotion that comes with being part of like a world as a fan. And I think that like makes a huge difference when you're writing something, as intricate and big as this whole world that she created, and then was like, here you go. You guys can fanboy over this. So I don't know. It's interesting.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I think we should probably talk about another book. Kristin, you read something for this trope, so you want to talk about it?
Yes, I read Libba Bray's The Diviners. And interestingly enough, which I did not plan this in advance and it literally just came to me, but the anthology of short stories that I read, I know I will quit after this. Libba Bray and Cassandra Clare were both in that anthology, and so was Holly Black.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I just
Wow.
literally, I'm like, I have to find that anthology. I'm like looking through my stuff, see if I can find it. Anyway,
They probably all have the same agent because Libba Bray and Cassie had the same agent.
is it
I don't
Libba
know
Bray
about
or Libba
Holly.
Bray? I always call her Libba.
I don't know. I would say Libba, but I could be wrong.
She
No,
can
wait.
she
I think
can
it's
message
Libba.
us and let us know.
Yeah, she'll let us
Yeah,
know.
let us know after you listen to
Just
this.
give us a call.
Yeah, she's right on that. So anyway, The Diviners, this one is Hidden World and it's also historical, but it's 1920s and it is in New York. So I'm like, how do I put this? Okay, so it was sorry, you're probably gonna have to edit this, Valia, because I'm like thinking slowly. My brain's like kunk, 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 kunk.
Nope, this is all staying in.
Yep.
as I try to get off of my anthology story. So The Diviners by Libba Bray, it is about a young woman. Her name is Evie, and she has she wouldn't, I think, call it a magical ability. She thinks it's a strange ability, and it is a strange quirk. But what she can do, and it's revealed really early on in the book, is if she holds on to something that belongs to someone, she sometimes is able to find out secrets about them. That object will convey information about the owner to her. So she is
Wow.
partying and she's having a really good time, and there's a boy there that's flirting with her, and he gives her one of her objects. She's like, I'm going to do a party trick. And she normally keeps her ability very, very secret because it's strange, right? And there's no magic in her world that she knows of. So anyway, she gets this object, and so you get to see on the page when she performs this magic trick, and the magic works, and the cost of magic is the next day she'll have like a raging headache and be like have a hangover, but with no drinking. So anyway, she reveals at this party the secret of this boy, and it destroys her socially. So her family sends her away to New York just so she can so the gossip can die down before she can return. So she goes to stay with her uncle, and her uncle owns this museum, and he's a professor, and he talks about the occult and the history of magic and all these things. And so of course it's this amazing, and the 1920s in New York is this amazing, vibrant setting for a story, and it rotates POV. So Evie's the main character, at least in the first book, and it rotates through some of these other characters, and you can see they also have a magical abilities, but they're different. So and they don't really tell you, even in the end of the book, exactly how all the pieces fit together. So through the series, it comes together, and it's really interesting. But this book is different from what I normally read in that it has a horror element, and Valia knows. Valia, woo woo! I'm putting it at the top.
I'm
of my
getting
PTR.
excited.
And for me, I
Dancing.
don't like horror. Like it legitimately freaks me out. I don't watch horror movies. If I read an award-winning book, a short story, I just wanted to check it out, and I didn't realize it was horror until I was towards the end, and it's been years, and it still horrifies me. Like at the back of my mind, I'm like,
My
oh
goodness.
my gosh, can you believe what that? Oh, it's terrible. So so anyway, Diviners, it does have that horror element, and I feel like to be a good horror, obviously you're tapping into people's psyche and things that they're deeply, viscerally frightened of. But in this one, the villain is so well done. He, like, you know how in Harry Potter, people are afraid to say Voldemort's name? That's how I feel about this character, because he's so, I won't say
Like
his
you
name.
can't say his name.
Yes,
You're gonna conjure him or something.
Looking behind.
Yeah, there's some dark. So I feel like kudos to the author, because the bad guy is probably the scariest bad guy I have ever read, but with the caveat that I don't read very much horror, but really legitimately creeped me out. So dear reader, be warned. This book is amazing. The world building is some of the best I've ever seen, and the villain is probably the best I've ever read. So if you're into hidden worlds and you think the 1920s would be something of interest to you, this is definitely one to check out. And she's a master of her craft. So very well written. It is
Sounds amazing.
I would
Sounds
almost
really
say
good.
it's a work of art. So I know I'm like, that's really weird to say, right?
That's a really high compliment. No, that's like, want someone to say that about my book.
Her craft is really well done. And like I said, some of these elements are so strong. Just a very interesting study. And you can tell when you read it that she has done a ton of research. And for me, that's something I definitely appreciate, the work that she put into this series. So, and every element, the language, the dialogue, the language that they use in the dialogue is phenomenal, in that she uses, it just immerses you in that world. You feel like you're living in the 20s because of the language that they use, and all the things that the characters are interested in, and the things that are happening in the periphery of the world, and the architecture, and just everything. It was just phenomenally done. So anyway, I'll stop gushing.
She's just
I read part of it, but I never finished
me too.
Because it was too scary.
No, I don't know. I remember it's long and it jumps around point of views. And I think it took me a little while to like get into it. And then I'm just one of those people, I just put things down and never pick them back up. Not because I choose to, just because
it's definitely a deep world. She spends a lot of time. It's a deep world. It's a long story burn. I actually didn't finish.
I have it sitting on my shelf, and I think it's actually signed. Like I bought it in the bookstore signed.
I didn't finish the rest of the series. I only read this one because honestly, the antagonist just scared the poop out of me. So I was like, I can't read any more of this.
Yeah, I know. I have started it. So when I was living in New York, I would read. I have a physical copy. It's on my shelf. It's the old original cover that I love. And when I was in New York, I would, obviously take the subway everywhere. So I had a Kindle version, and I would just read it whenever I was on the subway. And I started it like right before I left New York. And so when I stopped like riding the subway, I stopped reading it. And it was like I wouldn't go back to it because I just got sad that I wasn't like reading it on the train. I know, it's so dramatic. But that's what happened. And then like I just haven't picked it up again. And then I think I did it like recently. I did an Instagram post with the picture because I like love the cover, and I was like, I should like talk about this book. And one of my best friends, she was just like, oh my gosh, are you gonna read it? Because she loves Libba Bray so much, and she's always like asking me if I'm ever gonna like go back to it. So
you should.
2021.
You should.
I adore the
And then
Gemma
you'll
Boyle
text
series.
me and be like, Kristin, this was not scary at all. Your threshold for scary is low. I'll tell you who I like to read. Valia. Because those books, even though it's so funny because you love horror, but your books are so whimsical and fun and happily ever after. They're just like, magical fairyland books, not these scary.
I get it. Yeah, I get it all out of my system when I watch scary movies or read scary stuff so that I can write nice things.
Well, thank you.
It's all about balance. You're welcome. That's cool. No, I will read it eventually. maybe. I think maybe sometimes I get a little intimidated by the big brick books just because you
Same.
just because besides like obviously you have kids and you write and like all this stuff, like it's a big commitment. And it's funny because I love big books because then you're like so immersed in this world, but also like intimidated because there's so much that I need to do in a day that I don't want to just sit there and read the whole thing at once because I would. So speaking of big books, Stacy read one. You want to talk about it?
I tried
Yes.
to. I didn't realize it was that big because I didn't have it in person. So I got the
Right.
audiobook. And once I was looking at it, I was like, other books are like 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours. This one's 18 hours. And I had a week to read it. Well, yeah. So I didn't finish it. I got about a third
Okay.
of the way through the book. And I want to keep reading it because I actually really liked it. So I read Legendborn by Tracy Dion. And so, hang on. So it starts out, the main character's mother just died. And so the prologue is about the accident, and it goes through a lot of like the grief stages. And I found the writing to be like really, really, really pretty, like my kind of writing. I think a lot of times when we talk about really beautiful writing, we talk about like lush descriptions and the setting and yada, yada. She really talked about emotion deeply and like in relatable ways. And it was disappointing that I read the audiobook because I actually wish that I could
Oh yeah.
highlight lines and go back and find them later. So I did actually a search to see if I could find a couple lines that were that I really liked, that other people pointed out. So one is, death is not a connection, it's a sharp cut that severs us. Death separates us from one another, and yet it holds us close. As deeply as we hate it, it loves us more. This one, how does this boy navigate my emotions like a seasoned sailor, finding clear skies and bringing them closer when all I seem to do is hold fast to the storms?
Yeah.
I know.
So
Those are
Wow,
beautiful
I like
lines.
that.
about a girl. It's gorgeous. So she's sad about her mother dying. She ends up going to a new school. It's on a college campus. She like gets, I believe in the beginning, her mother like got really mad that she finds out that she applied for the school, and then she dies. And she goes, I think in part to get away. And I'm pretty sure there's some kind of backstory with the mom that we don't know yet. At least I don't know yet because I haven't finished it. And so she goes to a party on like their first weekend, and she stumbles upon these like magical creatures. There's a monster, and there's warriors that come and attack them and whatever. And she's not supposed to know any of this. She's not supposed to see it. She overhears talk of Merlin and Legendborn and Shadowborn. And then she gets caught and they wipe her
Oh.
memory. And it goes back. She wakes up in the morning and she doesn't know what happened. She gets in trouble for being at the party. But it kind of like step by step, she starts figuring out more pieces of this. And the entire first quarter of the book, she's entirely on the outside of this
Okay.
magical system. But she's getting closer and closer to understanding because she has an ability she learns to break the magical hold on her mind when they mind wipe her. And so
Ooh.
I think she's mind wiped like 3 times in the beginning of this book. It gets easier and easier for her to break the spell each time. So the third time, when she wakes up in the morning, she remembers almost immediately what had happened. And there's a boy that she meets that saves her one time, and he's the only person that she confides in about what she knows and what had happened. And she ends up figuring out that something to do with her mother's death was magical because she remembers having her memory wiped at the hospital after finding out that her mother died. And so she ends up like going in as a spy into this organization to try to figure out what happened with her mother. And Nick is the main male character, and he's important. Apparently, he's a descendant of Arthur. We find out.
Ooh.
And he was trying to get away from this like order of Merlin and whatever. But she kind of drags him back in to help her uncover the secrets. And the other aspect of this story that I found like really fascinating is it actually gets into like racial issues in kind of a subtle way. It's like an undercurrent. So Bray is Black, and this entire order, everyone is white. It's because it's based on heritage. So it's based on like the European heritage of King Arthur and the Round Table. And so she's the first Black person to ever like become a part of this. And so it's not like a huge part of the story, but it has these undercurrents that are just really interesting to like see this different perspective.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so like that was just something that I found fascinating.
Kind of relevant for now too.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen that book a lot of places at the end of 2020. Like it just came out, right? In like the autumn or something.
Yeah, it was part of the Goodreads Choice Awards, which is the reason I picked it. I was looking at like the list of those and I was like, that looks like Hidden Magic. I'm gonna pick that one.
I mean, that sounds really cool. I like one of my favorite things, and one of these days I would like want to write one, but Arthurian anything. Like I'm just like fascinated by just like King Arthur and like the whole, like all of that. I just love it. So that sounds really cool.
Yeah, it hasn't gotten into detail. It's more like they just talk about the names, like Merlins or wizards. There's not one person called a Merlin.
Okay.
That's Merlin. But so I'm still like figuring out how it all works. But it's interesting. It's an interesting twist on.
Yeah, that's cool.
Sounds really good.
I like that you haven't finished it yet too, because like you're in the midst of like discovering it, you know? So you're kind of just like, oh, okay, like it's cool. Because sometimes I feel like you get into parts of the book and you can get just meh, you know, like you don't want to keep going or whatever. But it's always fun to like, what do you think about this book in the middle of the book? So that's cool. I like that.
Maybe we should do an episode with that.
Where we can just...
Where we just read to
the
middle.
And then that's true. I read it in a day, now I have to stop.
That's actually like really interesting too. Because I do find that there are different parts of the book that I will stop at. Because sometimes I'm like, if I keep going, I will have to read more. Or, you know, like, so that's like, it is interesting because I guess as writers, we know that there's like different stages in the book. But as a reader, you don't think about that as much. You're just like, this is fun. It's not fun. I'm going to put it down. Like, you know, that's cool. I like the emotional state though. You talked about like the emotional. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think I might actually buy the physical book because, because I want to be able to look back at some of that stuff. And I'm liking it enough that I like really.
Do you know if it's going to be a series or if it's just a standalone? No?
I don't. I assumed series, but I just assumed.
It's true.
Which isn't always true.
I guess. So. There has been more variation in that recently for sure. And like in the last year, 2 years, where it's not just always trilogies, which I think is nice. Because sometimes you just need one and done. I think it was a test that read a standalone that like I put on my list, the Shadow something by Trish Levin something. I think it's the Shadows Between Us. Yeah. So that one I thought that was going to be series, but it's actually a standalone. And I'm like, oh, okay, then like it's going on my list right now. So that's cool. I'm excited. I want to hear what you think when you're done for sure.
Okay.
Me too.
All right. I guess we should talk about the book I read, which is kind of funny because you guys all read like these massive books and I read this like tiny little one. But I read Rebel Belle by Rachel Hawkins, and I really like Rachel's writing in general. Her first series that I read by her was the Hex Hall series, and that was like my not introduction, but at that time there wasn't like a lot of academy paranormal in young adult, and that's another series that disappointed me in the end, but we're not going to talk about that. And that one was really fun. And so Rebel Belle is different, but also very fun. And it's about Harper, who is like the Southern belle. Like she is everything. Like when you think of like the most Southern, just all the activities, all the talk, everything, like that's Harper. Like that's who she is.
Like Scarlet.
Basically, like she wants,
Gone with the
she
Wind.
wants the dresses, she wants the balls, she wants like the homecoming crown, like that's all she's like wanted. And yeah, it's this whole thing. And I haven't read anything that Southern, so I was very like, okay, like this is cool.
Yeah.
It was different. So she is basically in the middle of like a ball or something. I don't remember where this happens, but she gets these powers out of nowhere and she becomes a paladin, which is kind of like a guardian. And she becomes a guardian to a guy that she hates, who hates her. So this guy, David, they've been in school together since like the beginning of their time. And he's like the newspaper reporter, and he constantly just like writes bad things about her. And he just really doesn't like her because she's so like prim and proper and, you know, like all the debutante, whatever stuff. And he just like hates that so much. And because she's very popular and all that, he like constantly like just writes bad things about her. So they clash like crazy. And then she gets these powers that she didn't know magic existed in the world. And suddenly she's over here wielding a sword trying to protect this boy she hates. So that's basically the gist of the story. It's very fun. I actually really loved her best friend, Bray. She was very like, I don't know, Harper was very hard to like at times because she was just spoiled and, you know, like my way or no other way kind of thing. And it's hard to like relate to those kind of characters sometimes. You want somebody you can like, you know, root for basically. And Harper had like a lot of growing to do in that sense because she was very selfish and now she was literally tasked with a job where she has to be selfless. So it was very fascinating to see how that affected that kind of a character, you know? And her relationship with David was interesting too because obviously like they hate each other. So suddenly he's being protected by her and he's like, what the heck is happening? Like, why are we doing this? There is a love triangle in this book because she does have a boyfriend in the beginning. And you guys know I'm not like a big fan of love triangles. I didn't have a lot of fun with the way this one was either, but there is some things that happen that I was kind of like glad it was a love triangle, if that makes sense, because it brought more depth to the characters because of what like happened. And I don't want to say like what happens so that you guys can like read it, discover it for yourself if you haven't read this book. But yeah, the reason I picked it up is because it was sold as like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer in the South or something like that. Like there was like a cutesy little thing. And so the writing of the book is very like Buffy the Vampire Slayer-esque in sense that like the hand-to-hand combat and like that fast-paced action, which you guys know I love. So I really like enjoyed that aspect and the fact that it was like really fast-paced and stuff. I have the other two books and I started book 2, but I haven't finished it or anything like that because I like the new, like I liked when they weren't like when they were still enemies and she had to protect them. You know what I mean? Like that aspect, I just really liked it. And so I think like the book as just maybe it'll be my standalone in a series that I read and just not finish the other two. But I just thought it was really fun. I liked it a lot and it was very fast read.
That sounds fun.
That sounds cute, yeah.
I liked it. And I mean, it's obviously worked for the hidden magic thing because she's just like, magic? What is magic? Give me a pretty dress and walk me around a room, you know? And that's it. So it was really cool. I love characters just like being thrust into the hidden world aspect because it's just fun to see them.
It's a fascinating trope. I mean, everyone fell in love with Harry Potter.
I haven't read a lot. Yeah, I haven't read a lot of it lately. I feel like it hasn't been real big lately. There's only a couple, and it was kind of hard to find something that was newer. But it is. I'd like it to shift back that way because it was fun to get back into it.
What are you gonna say, Kristin?
Oh, I was just gonna say, well, and there's some confusion. First of all, I agree with Stacy. I feel like it has kind of gone through a cycle where it was really popular and now it's less popular. It's not as much as coming out with the hidden world. But when I asked people, I was like, what books do you love that are hidden magic? And I put a shout out. A lot of people were confusing portal fantasy with hidden magic. So maybe you want to take a minute and explain the nuance difference there.
Who?
Well,
I think you should do it.
Oh, me,
Go for it, Kristin.
Okay, so I guess I stepped in that, so I'll explain. So basically, portal fantasy, you see a lot with contemporary Fae, where people go through a portal and then they find themselves in the Fae world, or you see it a lot in middle grade. Portal fantasy is very common in middle grade, where some like a regular human child stumbles through. And a lot of people, when I said hidden world, Narnia I got a ton of people who were like Narnia.
Mhm.
And that's
That's a
very
portal
portal
fantasy.
fantasy. And so the difference is that hidden world it takes place on Earth, and the magic is on Earth. But at the same time, it can be gray, because there can be a portal aspect to a hidden world. So I would consider Harry Potter a portal fantasy, because there's always a point where Harry Potter has to go through some kind of a barrier to enter the magical world. Magic can happen, but
That's true.
it's illegal in regular world, right? So he has to always go through a wall to get to Diagon Alley, or through the platform at 9 3/4 to get to the train. And the train is how he gets to the magical realm, where magic is common. And the same with Fablehaven. Every time, like, magic can happen in the regular world, but for the characters to truly experience it, or quote legally experience it, they have to go through a literal gate into the Fablehaven property. So the lines can be blurred. So I can see why people would get confused, or not be sure. I wasn't sure. I had to go back and research it and make sure I understood, so that I was coming with the proper book.
Right.
So yeah. So there's a difference, but it's also a little bit gray.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting, because I do feel like there is a lot of portal fantasy. Like, I feel like that's what is or has been published for the last like couple of years. Like, that's what been the big one.
Yeah, in
the
YA,
hidden magic aspect went. And then the hidden magic went away.
And
like,
but
dystopian or whatever.
portal magic in middle grade has been like popular and continues to be.
Right. Yeah, when I think of portal magic, I think of like you're just in the human world, and then you go into the fantasy world, and you're there for the rest of the story, and then you come back to the human world later.
Yes.
But, hidden magic is more like it's intertwined, and you're shifting back and forth, and you have to deal with both at the
Would
same
you say
time.
then, so if Harry Potter is like portal magic for you, would like Percy Jackson be hidden world? Because it takes, it's gods in their world, right?
And they do have Olympus, but everything's happening in this world. Going back to Shadowhunters, most of it does take place in this world, but the institutes that they have in all of the major cities are hidden from the world, and they have to have Shadowhunter blood to even enter into them. So a normal person
But those
couldn't.
are kind of like veiled. I don't know if I wouldn't consider that portal though. Like it is, I see where like the lines are
It's blurred.
blurry,
Yeah.
But
that's where they can go and not have to keep it a secret, because everyone inside knows. But then once they exit again, that's when they need to.
They do go to a portal. Don't they go to Fairy though? So Fairy would be a portal.
Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. So there's a portal in there. There is, and when they
do have that one city, right?
It's a country, Idris. It's a country that's like in between a couple of countries in Europe. I can't remember which ones it's between, but that you kind of have to go through a portal to get into there.
That's like a very
That's interesting. I didn't think about it that way. They kind of go together sometimes. This hidden magic.
I was just thinking some movies that would work for hidden magic would be like Men in Black, sci-fi.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think we had like a similar conversation when we did the enemies to lovers. Right? Because the enemies to lovers versus I remember there was like a distinction where sometimes the enemies to lovers gets blurred as well, because it's to a point where like, is it, do you remember that vaguely? Yeah.
It was like it was hate to love. Yes. It was hate to love, or enemies to lovers.
Because I feel like so it's kind of fascinating to like see how even though they're like distinct tropes, like we don't think about them the same way. Because if I even like Kristin, she asked people and they went straight to portal fantasy, you know, because they didn't think. But as writers, we're like, okay, well, we need to just define the exact trope we're trying to do here, because apparently it can be more than one. That's cool. This is why I love this, actually, because I think just like reading these books and discussing them in like this small group setting, like a book club, like focusing on the tropes, I think it's like really fun to just like, I don't know, I feel like I learn things all the time.
I was just going to say that. I learn a lot every time I am a part of this or listen to this.
That's fun. Well, yeah.
Well, and we gave some recommendations for like movies, but we also have some indie recommendations. I wanted to recommend one of Valia's books. Her series, the Blackwood Prison series, is Hidden Magic. Would you say it was?
It does have portal in the second book, so yeah.
So there you go.
So I blurred too.
It's blurred in there, yeah. The first book is called Witch Condemned, and the main character, she's in prison, and crazy things happen, and she's assigned to a warden who, I'm assuming they hate each other.
Yes, very much so.
Very much so. But she learns that and I don't want to give away spoilers, but he's a part of something. And what's kind of cool about this too, so she's a witch, and she has to keep that a secret, that she's a witch. But a big part of this takes place in St. Petersburg, Russia.
Yay!
Valia told us some fun stories, like some of the influences on this book.
Oh, yeah.
Share this story that you told us.
I guess. So yeah, like she said, a lot of the first book especially, most of the second book too, but it takes place in St. Petersburg, which is where I grew up. And it was really fun for me to go back and like rediscover these places that I've actually lived in. And so like when they go to a certain place to like spend the night, it's like an apartment that I lived at. And that apartment has like a warehouse and a park across the street, and the river so St. Petersburg is built on a swamp, and there's a river that goes through the whole city, and it goes into Finland. And so these tourists would take these little cruise ships from Finland, and they would come and park basically next to my house on the river. And so my mom and I would like walk that pier, and that was like my first introduction to Americans, these like super, not all old, but super rich older people getting off these tiny cruise ships and just like going everywhere and doing things that tourists do. But yeah, it was really fun because there's a scene where she actually like goes there and she does something, and I'm like, yeah. I mean, I didn't do what she does, so if you guys read it, don't judge me. I was not a felon, but she does certain things.
Valia has not been in prison.
So yeah, but it was really fun. It was really fun describing like, they go to the Hermitage, which is like, you know, the Winter Palace, and they go through all the rooms. So I got to like describe some of the rooms that I love, and they like go to the Summer Palace at one point, and I got to like describe the gardens, and it was just like really, really fun to just like revisit like my old stomping grounds through this character.
Your childhood stomping grounds, right?
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
I think I love that you have little bits of Russia in so many of your stories.
Yeah. I mean, my people are probably like, my readers are like, can you just stop talking about this? But I'm like, never.
No, never stop talking about it.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of like, my mom has been reading my books. She always reads my books and she loves them. And so she gets really excited when she sees something, and she's just like, oh my gosh, I know what you're talking about, you know? And it's exciting for her to read something that, you know, like our old apartment and how I remember it versus how she remembers it. So, yeah, it's been a lot of fun writing that series.
And the fourth one will be released in the spring of 2021.
Yep.
And then it'll be complete.
I'm excited.
Read her books.
Thank you. Kristin? did you have a recommendation too?
I do. And actually it is Joanna's. So Joanna reader. I read Frigid. It's been a while since I read it, but it is a perfect example of a hidden world. There's shifters. And what I liked about Frigid is it's actually because the shifter world is written with contemporary books, but Joanna took the world and also wrote this prequel series. So, and it's the 1800s, I believe. Is that right, Joanna? So it's this.
Yes. Yeah. Going back to my inspiration from the Infernal Devices, end of the 1800s.
So it's the same time period as the Infernal Devices, and which actually not very many authors write in that time period, especially so historical fantasy is pretty rare to find. I know that Charlie Holmberg, her Paper Magician, is also historical fantasy, but slightly different time period, so it doesn't totally match up. And hers is based in England, so it's. And I think yours, wasn't it based in Oregon?
Washington.
Oh,
Yes.
Pacific Northwest.
Pacific Northwest.
I'm in Oregon, so I just like to.
It was Vancouver, Washington.
Okay, there we go. So it's rare to find, first of all, any fantasy books from that time period, and then also in the Pacific Northwest, and not like in California or New York. So,
yep.
Yes,
or London.
yes. So have one in the United States at all, let alone Pacific Northwest. So it's a unique location, and of course one that is near and dear to my heart. I really liked it. And then also the shifters are interesting, because we often see like a werewolf shifter or something along those lines. And in this world, the shifters are I don't want to say too much about them, but they're very unique. They start to trickle in. You start to learn about the shifters just a little bit at a time in this prequel series, but they are very different. And what's unusual about this character is that she's looking at it from, well, okay, so let me back up a little bit. So usually, I know, let me go back. Whenever you have a character with magic, they're either very powerful, or there has to be some sort of bad thing about them that makes the people dislike them, so that they are not the power players of the world. And so I'm sure there's other ways to do it, but that's just like a basic breakdown. So in Joanna's world, in the it's called Frost Boarding House series. So in this world, there's prejudice against shifters, and so the main character, who doesn't have magic, or does she? She has a prejudice against people with magic, but a lot of people do. That's very common. And so this character, her name's Camilla, the main character, she has a huge character arc. It's actually pretty rare to find books with characters that have such a massive character arc, where she starts out really having a strong dislike for shifters, and then grows as a human, and also grows in compassion, and changes her viewpoint of magical creatures begins to change. And so that, I thought that was really well done too. It's definitely a book I recommend. It is a sweet romance, historical fantasy, and a lovely book. Super recommend it, especially if you're looking for something in hidden world. This one is unique and an excellent book.
Thank you, Kristin.
That series is complete, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's a trilogy.
Yep, binge readers, this is for you.
Love historical fantasy.
Love it. Stacy, you had one too, right?
Yes. I get to talk about my favorite author. Yay.
Yep, I know you're excited.
Everybody knows I'm an Annette Marie fangirl, and so I'm going to talk about one of her books, Three Mages and a Margarita, which is kind of like an urban fantasy. It's quirky, and it's not usually like tonally, it's not what I usually read, but I read some of her other books and jumped to this one, and I really liked it. So it is about a very snarky bartender who lost her job because she can't keep her mouth shut. And she fights with the people drinking there all the time. And she thinks she threw a drink on someone and got fired. And she ends up finding a new job posting kind of by accident. And she goes into a place, and she is so stubborn, apparently. She goes through a magical force field that's supposed to stop humans from going through. It gives them like a feeling of revulsion, like don't go farther, don't go farther. And she pushes through it, and she goes in, and they don't even realize that she's human. And she goes into a magical guild, and she doesn't know where she's at. They don't know that she doesn't belong there. And they do a trial run as a bartender for this magical guild. And she ends up throwing drinks on 3 mages. And apparently they like it.
Magical people, man.
So they were like, well, she's hard enough, like she's tough enough that she can handle this, because some of the people here are not nice. And
Okay.
so they end up giving her a job, and eventually they learn that she has no magical abilities, and she's not supposed to know about the magical world. And so actually it goes for like several books where she's they kind of try to keep her secret, because she gets to know more of the people. And it's slow burn romance. There's a romance, but it takes a while to get there, and it's just a fun story.
That sounds fun.
Sounds fun.
I like that. I'll have to, once again, add it to my list.
Read Annette Marie.
Yes, I actually have like 2, I think, of her books that I got since like listening to you talk about her. And I'm like, I just need to read them. But yeah,
That one's a
those are
nice, easy
good.
read. Like it's not real dark or deep, at least in the beginning. It gets there eventually. But it's just fun.
Yeah, which sometimes you just need fun.
Right.
Yeah, I think a lot of people want fun,
Yeah.
especially when things are hard, like that's what you
Yeah.
want.
Well, good. Well, this was fun, I think.
Yeah.
This whole
Yeah,
episode.
Definitely.
So, yay us. I'm very thankful you guys are here. And in the next episode, we'll have some familiar voices coming back and a new one. So you're pretty much almost done meeting everybody in our group. So I'm like kind of excited to just have like everybody on the show at this point. But yeah, let's talk about what we're reading next week. So Joanna, what are you reading this week?
I'm reading Cursed by the Gods by Ray Wagner, as recommended by Kristin. It's homework.
I love Ray.
It's homework.
That's fun. I love Ray, like all of her books so much. She's one of my favorites. Kristin, what are you reading?
That's so funny because I just talked to Ray yesterday. She's awesome. I love her. I'm actually reading nonfiction right now. And Ray and I were just talking about that. So, and it's craft books. I know that's super boring. And I'm reading sci-fi and fantasy short stories almost every night.
Cool. Stacy, what about you?
I'm going to keep reading Legendborn for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I'm only about a third of the way through, so I've got plenty of reading material. I also have another one on my to-be-read list is Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon, which is a alien romance.
Okay.
And I've just been really curious about this genre. It's not my thing at all. I don't usually read that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, it's an experiment and I want to try it.
Is it young adult or adult?
No. It's like erotic romance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was like,
it's gonna be interesting.
The title sounds like really fun though.
Apparently it's kind of sweet, but yeah, it goes there. So
okay. All right. What am I reading this week? I think I'm finishing up a trilogy today, hopefully. And then I think I'm gonna read the Alex Harrow book, Once Upon a Witch, I think it's called. It came out at the end of 2020, and it is just like everything that I want in a book about witches. So I'm very, very excited. I've heard really amazing things about it. So it's a big book though. So, me and my fear of big books, but I think I'm just going to do it. I think I'm just going to commit and read it and see how it goes. So, but thank you for listening to Reading Queens. we're really glad that you hang out with us every week. So hopefully you keep coming back and we'll keep recording more episodes. But before you go, please take a moment to leave us a review. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Reading Queens Pod and stay tuned for next week. Happy reading. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.